certain orgs really are too big to fail. They would impact GDP so badly and cause so much unemployment that it would just be altogether bad. And I would say if a threat actor gains access to an org like that, they got them. Their process for backing something up is that by default it's excluded until they're told to include it. What the process should be is by default it's included until we're told to exclude it. And there's a business case for excluding it. And I would argue that if something can be excluded, why the hell are you keeping it? Delete it. Because if you keep it, a threat actor is either going to destroy it or they're going to exfil from it. And if you're keeping it, there's obviously some reason for keeping it. So why aren't you protecting it? Resistance obviously isn't working. It is always cheaper to be proactive.
No honor among thieves.
There is absolutely no honor among thieves. When you attack large enterprises, they're going to make the news. Using Change Healthcare as an example, in my opinion, outsider looking in, absolute atrocious performance. You can read the data, but they got ransomed twice.
Everyone, welcome back to Breachpoint, Fenix24 podcast. I've got the man, myth, and legend, John Anthony Smith, across the table from me. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Just for those tuning in, watching, listening, wherever you may be, John, you're founder, Chief Security Officer, Fenix24, 16 plus years, 1,000 plus breaches. Hell, last year was 200 plus breaches you all worked on.
That's right.
You got some experience here.
Yeah, we have some blood, sweat, and tears for sure.
So last time we were talking about legal, really focusing on that, because really you all cut your teeth, gotten really good at legal, and it's been kind of a niche, but you've expanded outside of that. And today we're going to talk more about large enterprise, maybe some differences there. But give us a quick rundown, like last time, a 30-second overview of legal. How'd you all get into that? And
yeah, my background is in law. Though I'm not a lawyer, I have consulted in the practice of law since 1998. That actually started here in this market where we're sitting right now because I worked for a consulting practice that focused on law firms. And so it's just really became a definition of my career. Unfortunately or fortunately, I guess fortunately, certainly I love lawyers. Actually, at one point we had shirts that said, I love lawyers. I heart lawyers, because frankly, not many people ever say they love lawyers, but I do in fact like lawyers. But certainly our organization has grown way beyond legal practices and doing defense for law firms. Right, we're deeply rooted into the enterprise today. And while we honor our history and we still, of course, work with a lot of law firms, both within breach and out of breach for defensive purposes, we're in every industry really today.
you guys have expanded outside of the United States. You've got teams all around the world. I mean, hell, was it last week or right after our last podcast, actually, you're over in London traveling. I mean, you guys are working around the clock all around the globe.
Yeah, actually, I was in London, namely for 2 meetings. They were both law firms, but we actually have over 30 employees in the UK. We have staff in Germany. We have staff in Singapore, Australia. We have clients in Japan. We have clients, frankly, all over the globe today. Due to our alignment with the legal industry on the breach side, and also our alignment with the cyber liability carriers on the breach side, and, of course, data forensics partners, they take us everywhere. I mean, essentially, we are all over the place. We're working breaches in Europe and the United States. I would say to you, at least to my knowledge, our largest breaches worked last year were in the UK, not in the U.S. at all, which, of course, the U.S. has been our traditional market. Frankly, we have most of our staff in the United States. But our sample of staff is growing outside of the U.S., and frankly, our breach sample outside of the U.S. is growing.
Now, real quick, is there a reason why you think UK has been the largest one? Are they larger in UK for some reason, or just that you all happen to work larger ones in UK versus US?
You know, I'm sure that if you had Heath or Mark on here, they could specifically tell you how that happens. So at least my best impression is that we have made some very key legal partnerships and also cyber carrier partnerships in the UK that bring us into events there, like here in the United States. And so it just happened to be that's what was true in that year. This year will probably be very different. Who knows where they're going to come from this year? I mean, it's highly likely to be Australia and Asia because those are growing markets for us. So as we get introduced to markets, right, we meet new law firms, new cyber carriers, and frankly, new events and also new DFR partners. You know, they pop up everywhere. So I think it just was a happenstance, and certainly from a lot of legwork on the part of Mark Heath and others on our team. Marco in Germany, a lot of great relationships, and done a lot of work around building solid relationships with organizations that are involved in breach.
Gotcha. Now, we know that legal is one of your verticals and had a lot of success there, but you get into like the large enterprise companies, you all have grown there as well. Tell me something about that. Like, who are the people calling you all at 2 a.m. with breaches that are in large enterprise? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, I would say that it is possible that you could Google and you may or may not find some pretty large organizations that we may or may not have been involved with. I would just say they're all kinds of industries, gaming. Very large gaming organizations, of course, manufacturers, very large manufacturers, retail outlets. I mean, there's all kinds of, basically every industry imaginable of enterprise scale we've been involved with. As you might imagine, threat groups aren't very selective about who they attack. I would certainly say Scattered Spider oddly tends to follow industry, right? They'll hit one retail company and then they'll hit many more. Or they'll hit, one gaming outfit and they'll hit many more. That isn't normal for, I would say, most threat groups. It's really more of a scatter plot, right? They're a spray and pray kind of attack, right? They're going after whomever they can get. Are very opportunistic, right? Actually, I was looking on the way in here about statistics around Akira, and of course, we work more Akira breaches than any other threat actor group, but they target the SMB, right? They don't target the enterprise at all. Very rare, if ever, have we seen them in the enterprise. But certainly, Scattered Spider and others are popping up. So all industries.
Gotcha. Now, why does Akira target the smaller ones? Less protection, less planning on resistance side, or?
I don't know. I'd have to do some reading on that. I don't know that I probably have read about it. I don't really know. I would say it's just their nature. It's more opportunistic. The group actually, I believe, was a splinter off of the Conti ransomware gang. They being Akira, tends to target firewall flaws, right? With SonicWall, Fortinet, we see many breaches happening from vulnerabilities in firewalls with them. Certainly, the SMB is who buys SonicWall. I mean, no enterprise. Well, I hope no enterprise is using SonicWall. Frankly, no company at all should use SonicWall. It's utter rubbish. But I would say certainly because that's what they're targeting, they're getting more of the smaller businesses just by the nature of how they work.
Gotcha.
And also, there's an added benefit. I think it certainly keeps them out of the spotlight. When you attack, large enterprises, they're going to make the news, right? If you've certainly probably read about what happened at Change Healthcare, I think their losses are now approaching $3 billion from their cyber event. You've got what happened to Clorox. Certainly, if you look across the globe last year, there's what happened at Harrods and other retail outlets. There was actually an airline also hit last year. I mean, these things are very noticeable. Whereas if you hit, a 300-person company in remote America, probably not going to make the news. Right. And if it does, it isn't going to be loud.
Right.
And so I think there's an added benefit to them. Actually, I was looking at the statistics. They have actually brought in more than, I think it was $244 million in ransoms. Wow. Akira.
That's amazing, but terrible at the same time.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
That is. Yeah. And that's all pretty much in crypto, right?
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
$244 million in Bitcoin, I believe is what the number said.
Wow. So the threat landscape for these large enterprise companies, let's talk about that some, because it seems like for larger enterprises, you have the high data, right? So there's a good amount of data there, probably more vulnerability, but you also have the high visibility you talked about. Like, who are the types of people that are on the radar? Does anyone go, or is there something that you see trend there with those two in mind?
I think anyone could be a target. Frankly, I think everyone is a target. Frankly, threat groups are opportunistic. Frankly, they're absolute scoundrels. Threat groups are absolute scoundrels. I hate them. They are the underbelly of humanity, and frankly, they need to be eradicated. I despise them. So who is a target? Really, anyone they can get money from. And certainly, enterprises have deeper pockets. They got more data. They got more people. They have more assets. There's more at stake, especially when you talk about some organizations, frankly, that are too big to fail. Using a term from 2008, certain orgs really are too big to fail. They would impact GDP so badly and cause so much unemployment that it would just be altogether bad. And I would say if a threat actor gains access to an org like that, they got them.
Right.
And they got them right where they want them.
Yeah.
Right. This is when you see governments getting involved. Frankly, if you do some reading of what happened in the UK and Europe last year, you'll see some interesting events where governments had to get involved because the impact to GDP was significant if these organizations don't come back online. And the truth of the matter is, if you're a threat group and you got one like that, the likelihood of getting a big ransom is pretty high. Matter of fact, using Change Healthcare as an example, which Change Healthcare and absolute, in my opinion, outsider looking in, absolute atrocious performance from a breach readiness perspective and breach recovery perspective. It is a shame what happened there. But if you look at them, like what's happened elsewhere, you can read the data, but they got ransomed twice. They paid a ransom. The threat group did not pay their affiliate. Then the affiliate re-ransomed them. I don't know that ransom was ever public, but it was into the big numbers of millions of dollars.
So the same breach, you got ransomed twice?
Got ransomed twice because there's ransomware as a service organizations who basically create the software and the mechanisms by which these affiliates then hack organizations. And so the ransomware as a service company gets the ransom payment, and then they have to pass funds down to the affiliate that actually did the hacking. And so it's a business model.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, the ransomware as a service gang, once they got this massive payment, they closed their doors and didn't pay the affiliate. Well, the affiliate has the data. So the affiliate re-ransomed the organization, and in doing so, they got two massive ransom payments. And this is all public data as far as I know. I don't know that the second ransom has ever been disclosed, what the number is, but the first one was definitely disclosed, and it's a big number. So they're making megabucks when they hit organizations of that scale.
No honor among thieves.
There is absolutely no honor among thieves. And frankly, thieves should not be trusted. And frankly, I wish as a society we could find a means to, I mean, these people are talented. I mean, they are talented. It's really unfortunate that they have to use these talents for injury, not good.
Right.
Scum. They're scum.
It seems like the personality, and again, I'm assuming here, but they like the challenge, especially when they have like a big, large enterprise, it can almost be seen as a challenge potentially, and when they do succeed, then they get all the news and publicity. It's almost like a pat on the back at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of what's the right word? I mean, certainly you've seen a lot of movies where they're like doing this big heist from a bank. I think there's a lot of energy in all of that, right? Yeah. I mean, I would say addicts acting out. There's probably a lot of energy in acting out, right, for an addict, and I think that's how it gets for criminals like this. They get addicted to the high.
Yeah.
And they just keep taking greater and greater risks. And eventually some of them do get caught.
I had a stat here that 68% of breaches involve human element. Does that seem to add up when you think through this? Like the human element of going through either, like last time we talked about the help desk, how many go through that part. And thinking about remote work since 2020 in large enterprises, I mean, how much do you see that playing out for remote work and people logging in remotely and the access there?
I'd want to know how they define the human element, because I think all breaches involve the human element.
I guess versus like a firewall, firewall error, which I guess can still involve human element. But
yeah, most breaches today are active, meaning the threat actors are actively doing something in an environment. And I would say that in most breaches today, humans are involved in all of it. I mean, certainly that, Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that stat. I don't know how they're defining those words, but I think certainly most things are human driven today, whether that's internal or external, and or even flaws from internal IT. And I know we talked a little bit about that before we came in here, but on the point, there was a second part of that you
About
made.
the remote work since 2020,
Yeah.
how you've seen that change in effect. Does that increase the human element, like the human flaw, or allow more vulnerabilities? Because I imagine so, right? Logging in remotely has its own set of
Remote
challenge.
work and SaaS applications and cloud adoption has basically exacerbated an already bad situation. The remote work and what most organizations do to facilitate remote work, frankly, is why credentials are one of the linchpins for why credentials are commonly leaking to the internet, and why threat actors are able to get into these environments with great ease, right? I mean, we have a stat, and I think you wrote it down there. I mean, I think it was 31% of our breaches last year. The initial entry was no MFA on VPN.
Yeah, 36%.
Thank you. 36% of our breaches last year were no MFA on VPN. Well, first of all, I know that it is, well, it should be common awareness that MFA is critical on VPN. But yet, if you're an organization like that and you're allowing remote work, all the threat actors have to do is get a credential and they can get on your VPN, on your network, and at your data. That's all they got to do. Well, if you're allowing your users to log into Office 365 as a simple example from a personally owned device, meaning there is no restriction preventing that log-on event from a non-corporately issued device, then the threat actors are going to have an easy time getting to your creds. I mean, they just are, because they end up cached in Chrome, and then Chrome has a terrible little feature, which any cred synced in it, cached in it, gets synchronized to Gmail. And so if a threat actor then gets in a user's Gmail or to their Chrome, they now have their creds. And so personally owned devices don't even have enterprise controls on them. They don't even have AV at all in most cases. And so because that is true, getting to user creds is very, very simple. Getting to authentication tokens to even bypass MFA, very, very simple. Matter of fact, we just worked alongside of a law firm who had a breach. They had business email compromise, which you'd have to look at Daniel Woods' exact research, but I'm pretty sure his document, his piece of research said that 70% of breaches that cause claims are wire fraud and business email compromise events. And how did that happen? It happened because this law firm allows public access to Office 365. If you had Office 365 and frankly all your SaaS apps configured such that they cannot be logged into publicly or from non-corporately issued devices and non-corporately governed networks, guess what? They're going to have a lot harder time getting your creds and getting into Office 365 to cause a wire fraud or a business email compromise. The truth is, however, because of work from home and because of the stupid bullshit marketing from the big SaaS companies and cloud providers, where they're telling everyone that cloud and SaaS is more secure, it isn't more secure. Matter of fact, by adopting it in the way that they're encouraging you to, you're actually exposing yourself to greater risks than what you had before you used the app.
Say more about that. I'm curious there.
Because it's really a simple problem. If you allow your employees to use SaaS apps on devices and networks that are not controlled, meaning they technically have the ability to log into these things, your creds are so easily capturable. Tokens are so easily capturable because users' devices are not secure. They don't have corporate controls and they don't have CrowdStrike and SentinelOne and these things on them. And so naturally, threat actors are going to have a very easy time getting to their creds. Users are doing all kinds of dumb shit on their personal devices. So therefore, you should not allow them to enterprise apps from personal devices, period. It should not be allowed. So that's what I mean. With this facilitation of remote work, we've basically lowered our shields. And as convenience goes up, security always goes down. Period. That is always true.
So when we're talking about like these enterprise, larger corporations, one of the assumptions is like larger revenue, larger budgets, and they're safer. But is that something you see play out as well? I mean,
I believe larger orgs frankly, all orgs are vulnerable. But I think that large orgs are in particularly vulnerable for many, many reasons because it's really hard to get things done in a large org. They're usually political. There's cultural problems. There's in large orgs, there's more of a culture of inaction than action, right? We're going to talk about it for 24 months before we actually do anything.
Right.
Well, by then you've already been raped by some threat actor. Even though the budgets are large, they're commonly filled with inaction. And so, I talk to a lot of big companies, and I can tell you that what I commonly say to them, it is statistically unlikely that you will have a recovery. And they're like, why? We're spending all of this. We have the most expensive backup tools. Because it isn't a factor of how much money you're spending on tools. It's a factor of how much money you're spending on orchestrating people, process, and policy and product against breached truth. So you first got to have access to the truth. And second, you've got to actually orchestrate against it. You can't trust your product vendors to tell you how to orchestrate against breached truth because, frankly, they have one thing in mind when the sales guy shows up at your door is to sell you a widget. Widgets don't work unless they're part of the machine. And what commonly happens with tools is they get deployed and they're largely ignored. And so organizations, when they find themselves in breach, especially big ones, they don't know their assets. They don't know their dependencies of their various apps. They don't know where their data actually is and how it interplays with one another. And so to actually recover it is very difficult because it's filled with a patchwork of guesses. And there's no one person in a large org that knows how any one single app actually works. And so I would say large budgets don't always equal safety. Matter of fact, I would say large budgets often blind them to truth and encourage inaction. I think being nimble and governing from a position of breach and focus on resiliency is always more important. And essentially no one's doing that. We talked before this, and we talked about the size of the industry, right? The resistance defense industry, cyber defense industry, is about a $200 billion market. The recovery industry or market is about $20 billion. Yeah, so just putting it in perspective by the dollars, there is way more spending on buying products to prevent breach than to buy products and services to actually recover from breach. And this whole paradigm needs to be turned on its head because truth is, resistance obviously isn't working. Right? It obviously isn't working because breaches are all over the place. They're only getting worse. The basics are being ignored. And it is because companies are focused on buying products and tools and widgets, and they think they're safe by buying a damn tool. A tool in and of itself will never protect you. A hammer has to be used to drive in a nail. That requires a human. That also requires a human that knows what to do with the damn hammer. And that is just not what's playing out in truth, right? And organizations, you couple this with obviously they're spending so many dollars on resistance. They're largely ignoring resiliency. And when you find organizations, especially at scale, big companies with big budgets, find themselves in these breaches, they're just shocked. We've spent 3% of our IT spend or 30% of our IT spend on cyber tools. And why? Why did this happen? It happened because you didn't focus on actual recovery and actually leveraging those tools for outcomes. You should stop buying tools and start buying outcomes.
Yeah, some stats to support that. We're talking about before, 93% from breaches experience either partial or full data loss that doesn't come back, unrecoverable.
93% of organizations experience some form of permanent data loss. That's what we see in breach. And that is because, bluntly, most orgs don't have a survivable form of recovery. And most orgs, unfortunately, don't understand their data. So even when their backups do survive, there's always something that wasn't getting backed up at all. Like, well, oh, we didn't know that, the app team had put that server over there. They never told us that they created it. Most orgs, especially big ones, their process for backing something up is that by default it's excluded until they're told to include it. Dumb.
Yeah.
That's dumb. What the process should be is by default it's included until we're told to exclude it. And there's a business case for excluding it. And I would argue that if something can be excluded, why the hell are you keeping it? Delete it. Right? If it's not good enough to back up, it's probably not good enough to keep.
Right.
Because if you keep it, a threat actor is either going to destroy it or they're going to exfil from it. And if you're keeping it, there's obviously some reason for keeping it. So why aren't you protecting it? And there's all this bad decision making that's going on around resiliency, right? Orgs don't have good tools, good processes, good people for identifying what should be backed up, how it should be backed up, aligning that really to corporate objectives. And in fairness to internal IT orgs, they are doing their best. I do believe that. I don't think this is like these are bad people doing something malicious. I just think what we're doing is we're operating in old paradigms, old ways of thinking, right? Certainly the threat landscape started to change significantly, but about 14 to 16 years ago, right? It went from being, hack hobbyists and hacktivists and nation-state actors mostly to being financially motivated threat groups who frankly can attack anybody, anytime, because they can make money at it. And so I would just say that organizations haven't caught on. But secondarily, I would say they also don't have good paths to the data, right? Because the data of these breaches, how they technically happen, is getting locked up by the lawyers. And lawyers are doing their job. So in fairness to the lawyers, they're doing what they should do to prevent and limit litigation. But in the same time, they're actually causing a negative effect on the industry at whole because there's no way to get to the data. On occasion, there will be a CISO like the CISO of Okta. When Okta had their last breach, he was so gracious to literally write a letter, a memo of how it happened, why it happened, and disclosed it to the whole world. That almost never happens. So I would say, firstly, I would applaud that guy. Like, good job. That's what should happen. But at the same time, so the second problem really is that internal IT departments really don't have the data.
Right.
And thirdly, I would say rarely do they have partners, and there aren't many. To my knowledge, we probably are the only pure play resiliency focused organization on the planet. I don't know of another one. I mean, certainly there's a lot of product companies that would claim they're in the resilience market, but truly focused on resilience from the context of breach. I believe we're alone. I don't think that there is anybody else. And so companies don't have good partners to really bring them in the light of the truth.
Yeah.
So they don't have the data, but they also don't have a partner to give them the data or to bring them in the light and really tell them and guide them and usher them to a current reality. And so they're all, frankly, suffering with ignorance. And fourth point I would just make is that there's also a huge gap in the world around understanding of data, assets. We call them assets. The understanding the data, understanding its dependencies, and we have a huge leg up and advantage here. We have a platform dedicated to this that we deploy during breach. We have a platform dedicated to this that we deploy in most of our managed protection services. So we are very hyper-focused on understanding data, its dependencies, and making sure it's protected to the objectives of the org such that it can then be tested regularly for recovery. Yeah. So, I mean, we are, to my knowledge, the only pure play hyper-focused resiliency company that can actually usher an assurance of recovery for an org.
That's some great points, because if so many businesses don't want to show their vulnerability and talk about the breach for all kinds of reasons, right? They don't want their customers to know about it. And if you have a IT department that's kind of siloed in that business and not able to pull the data, like you all having so many different partners and clients around the world, you're getting to see what happens all the time. So you're learning from every one of them. You can put that in play for other businesses as far as like how you handled it for this breach or that breach. So it really is an upper hand to have someone like yourself learning from these others, because where else do you go to get that information? I mean, it's very challenging to find, I imagine. How else do other people really train on it without doing what you all are doing?
Yeah, they're not training on it. And, organizations are, in many cases, obligated to do what's called a tabletop exercise. A tabletop exercise, for lack of better words, is a simulation of an event, an IR event. And you're supposed to, show how your systems are going to hold up, how your plan's going to hold up. Orgs are doing these things and they have no basis in reality. I like something that Heath Renfro on our team, who runs our recovery team, says. He says, you know what, you should throw your IR plan in the garbage. They never work. They never work because the IR plans, as they were crafted, were based on a set of assumptions that never hold true in our actual breach. Like most tabletop exercises is based on the assumption that your backups actually survive, but statistically it's unlikely for them to survive. So right there, you see the whole thing comes raining down. And so orgs are, they're doing what they know to do. It's just not based in truth. And we are uniquely positioned for sure to do this for orgs. And I don't know if we've talked about it before, but when Mark Graysman came into our org, I brought Mark into the org, and he ultimately is now our CEO. But Mark changed the definition around our value system. He actually leveraged the story of the Good Samaritan from the New Testament to actually define our value system. And I would just say that, our value system of being a Good Samaritan, asking for help and providing help is fundamental to who we are. I really loved how he used that parable to really describe our values, because that is what we're doing every day. I was on a podcast yesterday, and I forgot the question, but I really am passionate about what we're doing because, to be frank with you, we're saving lives. We're saving jobs. We're saving lives. And that is energizing. Why do I get up every day? My job is hard. My job is very hard, very stressful. That's why I have these wrinkles on my forehead now. My job is very stressful. But the reason I do it every day is because, to be honest with you, if we can just save one, we just want to save one more. And, during COVID, we got a call from a hospital that had over 100 patients on respirators. They were down. CEO called Heath and basically said to Heath, we're going to have to relocate these patients on Monday. And I don't know if y'all know much about relocating patients on respirators, but one, it's hard, and two, they're probably going to die. This just isn't something easily done, and frankly, it shouldn't be done.
Right.
We got the hospital up by Monday. Their key systems were restored by Monday. We poured our blood, sweat, and tears into it, and we got those systems recovered. So that those patients didn't have to be moved. And I can see why, and I know firsthand why, our recovery team, they get so energized, because it is very empowering to know that you're doing something good for another person.
Yeah.
So our Good Samaritan system, sorry I got off on a bunny trail, but
it's great.
The Good Samaritan value system is critical to who we are.
It's like you're going to war, really.
We are definitely in war. Matter of fact, actually, we now define our recovery operations as wartime.
Yeah.
And all of our defensive operations, we call them peacetime. It's better to meet us in peacetime because we can commonly prevent wartime.
Right.
Or at least reduce the likelihood of its impact. Right? War is coming. It's always coming. There's going to be a blast. And limiting the blast radius is key.
Yeah.
And that's why resiliency is so important, and hyper-focusing on it is so important, because you want to limit the blast radius. You want to rebuild your buildings, rebuild your data and everything quickly.
Right.
So basically the net financial effect of it all is low.
So whenever a business comes to you, they're in wartime, have been breached, is there one common thing that you see happening that's caused all this?
Yeah, they got the basics wrong. Matter of fact, it was funny. A gentleman on my direct team that I work with every day, his name is Sid, and he says, Sean, I've heard you speak so many times. And he said, it seems to me that basically everyone's getting the basics wrong. And that's exactly true. Everyone's getting the basics wrong. So how are they getting in? They're getting the basics wrong. But more importantly, why the breach is so bad is because they're getting the basics of recovery wrong. So resistance, why is it happening? Initial points of entry, no MFA on VPN, exposed SaaS apps, no device pinning on tokens, no timeout on tokens. These things allowing threat actors to get in with great ease. Exposing your VPN directly to the public internet without limiting it to specific devices issued by the corporation. These things allow Citrix and VDI, AVD and Horizon View exposed directly to the internet without device trust requirements to actually log into them. If you're doing those things, your resistance controls aren't going to work because threat actor access to your infrastructure looks just like an everyday, ordinary user, and so your tools aren't going to notice. They're going to let that behavior go. This is called living on the land, off the land. Threat actors largely live off the land, and that means that they're using commercially available tools, things that are already in your environment commonly or already allowed in your environment to do their damage. If they're doing that, your security tools are just going to ignore it. Oh, that's just a normal user behavior. We're letting it go. And so that's why resistance controls commonly fall on their face, because they're not designed to detect normal user behavior as malicious.
Right.
And so threat actors going to get right in. This is why you got to get the basics of recovery correct. 1, survivable recovery. 2, confidence of timely recovery. And 3, that you've strengthened the resistance controls around your recovery capabilities to reduce the likelihood of a threat actor getting that far to begin with without being noticed. If you're not doing that, your recovery is going to fall over. And frankly, I would say organizations need to get out of the recovery business. Organizations will never be able to do this with excellence. They just won't. They don't have the data. They're always going to have to pivot toward product companies to choose the tools, and they're always going to implement the tools wrong. Even if they implement them right, they're going to get undone with time. You got to have someone that does this for you. You shouldn't be doing this on your own. It should be a cooperation with someone who has the data that can constantly teach you and test and continuously inform and continuously harden for you and with you. Orgs can't do this on their own.
So last time we talked about a stat, 84% of companies don't have survivable backups. Is that statistic unique to legal, or do you see that across all companies?
Oh, all companies. That statistic is across all breaches, actually. And Daniel Wood, my buddy from Coalition, his stat in his backup publication, he said 58% of all claimants discover a partial or full backup and recovery capability during a significant breach. So threat actors destroyed everything. They realized 58% realize their backups don't work or weren't working.
Wow.
And so that's pretty scary. Ours is 84% because our stat's a little different. Our stat says how many companies did we meet and breach that had a survivable backup and recovery capability. Not whether it survived. Was it survivable? That's our stat. 84% of orgs do not have a survivable backup and recovery capability. And when I say survivable, I don't mean immutable. I mean survivable. Those are very different. Immutability is defined by product vendors, very different. The word does not mean the same thing everywhere. You can have immutable backups and they can still be destroyed. They have to be survivable. Survivable means they can't be deleted until they expire. There is no path to delete the backup except that it expire on its own. If your backup, your definition of survivable or immutable means anything other than that, you do not have survivable backups. And it goes deeper than that, right? It also goes into timely recoverability. So the stat is 84% don't have survivable backups, but even fewer have timely recoverable backups. Of the 20, I can't do simple math. Of the 16% that actually had a survivable backup, only 8% of those can put the data back timely.
Wow. You had a stat here of average days down is 23 days?
Yeah, 23 days is the average days down. And that's a global stat. That's not our stat. Frankly, I'll be honest with you that our clients recover way faster than that commonly, even when their backups don't survive. We are tuned for time.
Yeah.
Insurance carriers love us because the single biggest expense in breach is business interruption. And we are designed and tooled to disrupt interruption. We want to get an org back up faster than anyone else on the planet. And if you follow our guidance, we will recover you faster than anyone else can, assuming you let us do it, even if your backups are destroyed. And so that 23-day stat, that's the average globally. That's not ours, but we recover commonly way faster than that.
So walk me through like that first 24, 48 hours when like a large enterprise company calls and you all get on the scene. What's that look like? I mean, that's probably like go time, obviously, right then.
Yeah. Frankly, every breach that, well, I shouldn't say every, almost every breach that we work, we did not know the org before their breach. And so there's been very little preparedness for a real breach, right? Big orgs commonly do have IR plans. They commonly have been testing their incident response, their IR plans, again, with tabletop exercises. The problem is those assumptions for those exercises and the plan are commonly don't hold up. And so all that stuff just can be thrown in the garbage. So basically what they've planned to do commonly doesn't work. I would say if you were going to do something simple that every org could do today that's very critical in those early moments is have your partners lined up. You need a great data forensics partner. You need a partner that understands the ecosystem of recovery for DFIR, meaning they know Fenix24 and how we recover, because frankly, we are the fastest on earth for a recovery, period. So you need a strong DFIR partner that knows us. Secondly, you need a good breach counselor. Then that relationship needs to be already negotiated. You need to know who they are. You need to know how to call them. You need to know how to, of course, activate your data forensics partner. And thirdly, you need a recovery partner. You need to be in a retainer with Fenix24. You need to be brought into the light, because we don't sell retainers. We only sell assessments that include retainers. You need to be brought into the light about your true resiliency as an org. If you have done that very basic step, meaning you have those partnerships aligned, you've been brought in the light about your true resiliency, you're onboarded with us already, we already have enough data on you, and we already have that relationship to recover you even faster than we ordinarily would had we just met you in breach. So that's a very basic thing that, frankly, most orgs don't. They got their IR plans, but they don't know who to call. So we end up having to, make trading favors with law firms and trading favors with DFIR companies to get them all the partners that need to be in place to actually do this. So there's time waste.
Yeah.
Second thing is, in the resiliency category, is because organizations commonly don't have a survivable backup, backups don't commonly survive, those early hours are spent, did the backup survive? Can we actually recover this organization, right? We're spending a lot of time doing that. Third thing is we're also spending a lot of time doing the forensics captures for the DFIR partner, right? If you choose a data forensics incident response partner, a DFIR partner, that uses a different tool than the tool you've already got deployed to your endpoints, there's time suck there. We have to deploy a new tool, and we have to facilitate and help with discovery from a different tool. You really need a DFIR partner that uses the tool that you already have deployed.
Yeah.
So that cuts all that time. And another point I would just say in those early hours that wastes a lot of time is excess capacity. Organizations are commonly running their capacity at 60 to 80% consumption. And when you find yourself in a breach, you can't touch the original workloads. All the original data requires forensics investigation. It's a crime scene, right? And so, like you see in the movies, they got to draw the tape around the crime scene and they have to do an investigation. An investigation is imperative. And there are so many organizations I see misstepping on this. If you've had a breach, you must have an investigation, because how are you ever going to really know if you might have recovered, but did you actually prevent the behavior that caused the breach from happening again? This is why orgs get breached 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, because they don't actually fix the problem. It's stupid, so stupid. So the last thing I would just say, and there's a lot more things I could hit in those early hours that are really exacerbating time, wasting time, is the lack of excess capacity. You can't touch the original workloads. You need a space to actually recover to.
Right.
I will say in the industry, there is a large push for what are called clean rooms and safe spaces for recovery. This whole construct is bullshit. It's motivated by money. The orgs that are peddling these products are making a tremendous amount of coin on selling these things. But the truth of the matter is, in breach, all that stuff just slows you down, and frankly, it doesn't work. And so it's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure we don't have time for it. But clean room technologies, if you're investing in this, you are way overspending probably on resiliency that won't work.
All right. So you've got 4 brands within the Fenix24 umbrella, and I know they have to do different parts of everything you just talked about. So you've got Fenix24, of course, Athena 7, Griffo 5, and Argos 99. Tell me some about those and like which one do they typically engage with first?
Yeah, if you're engaging with us in wartime, you're engaging with our Fenix24 incident response recovery team. If you're engaging with us in peacetime, almost all of our clients start with an assessment. To my knowledge, we're the only company on earth that is actually selling a resiliency-focused assessment born from breach reality. There's a lot of folks selling resiliency assessments born on poor assumptions. We are not doing that. It's based in fact, based in truth, and we're looking at any product you got, any products you got. And so the second way to start with us really in peacetime is through that assessment vehicle. That also puts an organization in a 12-month retainer with us, and we get to bring them in the light on their resiliency capabilities, even if they do nothing else with us. At least they're in the light, we're in the light, and we know what we committed to with our excess capacity for the retainer. The other 2 orgs are solutioning orgs that are actually follow after wartime or peacetime. But Griffo 5 is actually our managed protection services entity. We use that same breach context to actually assure recovery, assure resiliency, performing rigorous testing, rigorous hardening, multiple copies, multiple identity planes, all kinds of things that we can unpack technically. But Griffo 5's primary service is something we call Security Summa, which means security above all else. We have other services, but that's our managed protection entity. Security Summa is actually a confluence of all the brands, but Griffo 5 does most of the work. Argos is back to that asset identification, dependency mapping, right? How can you ever protect what you don't understand? It is our eyes and ears into what exists in the environment. Argos was actually a Greek god, I think, of 100 eyes. In the Christian tradition, there's also similar things. There's definitions of the beasts that have eyes in their wings, and their eyes go to and fro throughout the earth. There's all this in various Christian myth religious myths. But we adopted that namely because the concept of having 100 eyes and basically knowing 100% of everything going on, while it's admirable, it's not achievable. But getting to 99% visibility is probably achievable, at least getting very close. And so our goal is, of course, to seek to understand so that we can accurately protect, accurately assure, accurately recover. In best case, you do those things as part of a managed protection service with us before you're breached, right? So that we can make sure that we can recover and we can do so quickly. And so that's what the companies do.
So that's perfect transition. You said before your breach. So between like a proactive versus reactive, is there, I mean, in your experience with this, which last year we mentioned earlier, you had over 200 breaches you all worked on last year alone, difference between like their exposure between proactive and reactive financially? I'm sure there's a difference, but what are your thoughts and what have you all seen?
Is the basis of the question knowing what the financial impacts are to the org for proactive response versus reactive response?
Right, someone that was planning ahead, basically, or working with you all.
Oh,
or
God,
someone.
It is always cheaper to be proactive. Always cheaper. I mean, we discussed coming in here, the average cost of a breach is $4 million. Okay, yeah. That's the average. That isn't what most companies are. There are orgs that are pulling the average down. That's an average. That's the mean. Like, some orgs are paying $10 million in their ransom alone, right? And if you look at what's happened at Change, and I hate to pick on them, but they need to be picked on, right? They've blown $2 billion plus, approaching, I think, $3 billion in losses related to their breach. Now, tell me what cyber solution with assurance of resiliency is ever going to cost $2 billion.
Right.
Not going to happen. I mean, you're talking about 100 years worth of expenses, right?
Yeah.
That's insane. Insane. If they had just done a little more legwork, and again, I know nothing specific. To be clear, I know nothing specific about Change except what has been disclosed publicly. It is obvious to me, outsider looking in, that they were not resilient. They did not do their homework. They did not do this well, and their backups probably didn't survive. And what I would say is proactive approach to resiliency is always going to lend itself to a much lower expense. This is why insurance carriers love us, because we save them money. And both on the wartime side, where we've never met the org before, and also, of course, on the peacetime side, they love us because we reduce their cost. And when they insure somebody, they can, with better confidence, provide them a policy at a lower cost because we do our job well.
Yeah. Now you mentioned ransom. So tell me some about ransom. I mean, how do you all walk through that with someone, or I mean, what's your thoughts on paying versus not paying when it comes to ransom?
Yes, to be clear, we don't negotiate ransoms. I mean, we are not that type of org. There are orgs that are literally dedicated for negotiating ransoms. And frankly, you should have a relationship with one of those established too before your event. You should also be sure if your insurance carrier actually pays for ransoms. Otherwise, you're going to be paying for these things out of your own pocket. But we don't negotiate ransoms. So there's essentially four providers involved in every breach. There's the data forensics partner, there's the breach counselor, the lawyer, who's obviously involved in the ransom negotiations. There's a ransomware negotiator, and then there's a recovery partner, which is Fenix24. Should an org pay? Should they not pay? Certainly, we're probably a party to some of that. Really, our focus is recovery. What I will say to you is many orgs, when their backups are destroyed, if they don't pay a ransom, they're probably not getting their data back. Now, with that said, there's a caveat. We have found methods to get data back even when it was presumably destroyed. And where the backups were destroyed. So we do have some tricks up our sleeves to get data back, and many of the breaches that we go through, the organizations don't pay ransoms. They do not. And preferentially, no organization would pay a ransom. I don't think that it's fair to assume that organizations will never pay ransoms. And frankly, these talking heads in the various governments around the world, like, we're going to ban ransom payments. That is so insanely stupid to me. Stupid. I'm not saying I agree with ransoms. I'm not saying I agree that companies should pay ransoms, because I emphatically do not. You're just encouraging crime. However, you're talking about eliminating whole orgs. They're left with sometimes left with no choice but to pay a ransom. Yeah. So if we're going to ban ransoms, maybe we should ban the reason for the ransom. Like if you're paying a ransom to keep the data from getting dumped on the public internet because of an exfil, which is commonly part of these events, well, maybe that should be banned.
Right.
But preventing an org from paying a ransom when their only path to surviving is to pay one, that's mean. I just don't. I can't get behind it. I will never get behind it. At least right now, in the foreseeable future, I couldn't get behind it.
Yeah. Now, of course, buzzy trend word, whatever you want to call it, have my thoughts on it with AI, and obviously everyone's hearing about it everywhere. How have you seen that affect the industry? You're seeing that with multiple vulnerabilities security-wise, or?
There's a lot of novel talk about how AI is amplifying attacks, certainly discovery of vulnerabilities, writing malicious code, these kinds of things. AI is amplifying the effects of all of that. I would just say to you that it's the basics, man. The basics. AI, great. It's fun to talk about, but the basics are wrong. Why is AI able to amplify? Because it speeds up finding flaws in the basics. We got to get the basics right. Start with resiliency, work our way backwards toward resistance. We need to harden to breach reality. And even AI is going to have a tough time with that if we do it right. AI certainly is speeding a lot of things up, and AI is in our context. We do leverage AI. I will keep those close to the vest of what we do with it, but without a doubt, it is helping threat groups. I just think more of it's novel behavior, and it's just speeding up what was already true.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about AI and how you all use it, but you keep that secret.
I'm keeping it close to the vest.
So I've got another question then, because right before this, I guess last night sent you some documents, different things about us chatting today, and you said you can't open Google or don't open Google on your device. What's the reason for that? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, Google Chrome in particular, which is probably, I haven't looked at the stats lately, is probably the most popular browser. Basically, everybody has a Gmail account, right? The problem with allowing personal email services like Gmail at work is that they don't go through the corporate filter. And if you allow Gmail at work, coupled with the use of Chrome at work, or you allow your users can get to SaaS apps, corporate SaaS apps from personal devices that have Chrome and the user's logged into Gmail, then you run all kinds of risk of credential leakage. So not only could a user get a malicious link or a malicious attachment that can go through the corporate filter by allowing Gmail access, they could also be leaking your passwords. And so we prefer that personal email services like Gmail, Hotmail, Ymail, all these things be blocked. And so you're correct. We do not allow these services on my phone. And frankly, I'm not a big advocate for certain technologies like that. I mean, the punchline really is prevent leakage.
Gotcha.
That's really it.
All right, so practical advice, that sort of thing for people listening, watching. What's the one question a board member, C-suite executive should be asking their IT team that they almost never ask?
I believe that boards and audit committees are being commonly fed a line that's born from compliance, checking boxes. We're safe because we have an ISO sticker on the door, or we're NIST aligned to some stupid framework, or not that the frameworks are stupid, I shouldn't have said that. We're aligned to some framework. These things do not assure resilience. The only way you can have confidence of resilience is to prove it. And so what boards should be asking is, have we proven it later? And if the answer is, oh yes, we worked a tabletop exercise 6 months ago with some massive big accounting firm, yeah, probably not true. You're probably not going to survive. That is not a true test. What is a true test is to actually leverage someone who understands breach, that understands how your tools are likely to fall over in your face, and measure them. So the question they should be asking is, have we measured them with someone like Fenix24? Again, I don't know of another entity doing what we're doing. There might be one on Earth. Of course, the Earth is big. But I would say to every board member, have we had an assessment from Fenix24? When was the last time we measured ourselves against breach truth?
Well, so obviously you do a lot of public speaking events and engagements there. So where can people see you live, and what events do you have coming up next?
I will be at RSA. I'm not speaking at RSA, but I will be there. I'm also speaking at a conference in Birmingham. I think it's actually I've forgotten the name of the event, honestly. I'm also speaking at Osaka. Trying to think.
You just did that podcast yesterday, right?
I did a podcast yesterday. It was, I think it was Cyber Pro. I think was the name of the podcast.
Okay.
I do so many of these things, they run together. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Cyber Pro. So certainly that'll be releasing soon.
Gotcha. And then, for large enterprises and listening that want to get ahead of this, what's the first step? Where do they start? Where do they go?
The best thing to do is to contact us to perform an RBRA. If your organization has never done one of these, you should do it because we can bring you into the light on your true resiliency readiness. At the very minimum, that's what I think every org should do. And then leveraging that, of course, there might be solutioning at the end of it. There probably will be, because to be honest with you, I don't know that we've ever assessed a single org that didn't have a smoking gun that we discovered. So I would just say starting there is the best approach. You can obviously contact me. My email is just john.smith@fenix24.com. I would get it to the right place. There's also some generalized email addresses on our website. There's also a form there that you can fill out. But either way is fine.
All right. It's Fenix24.com. I'm sure on LinkedIn as well. And I think some of the most recent posts posting about travel, and I saw something about, what was it? One of the planes and the flight lines was really good. But anyway,
Oh, that was me.
Yeah,
That was
you
me
posting
posting that.
that.
Actually, several members of our team are actually traveling throughout Asia at the moment for various events and meetings. So there's events going on in Asia. I know right now. I'm not obviously there. But the post you're referring to is I had a really great flight attendant from American Airlines coming from Charlotte to Chattanooga several weeks ago. He was amazing. Amazing. Best ever.
I always like reading those posts from you because it's just not all in cybersecurity. You get like these other
I
information
love
you share.
people. I love people. Frankly, people are way more fun than computers. So when I meet somebody interesting and energizing, I like to meet them again and talk about them. It's fun in a good way, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been another great conversation. Appreciate you. It's great chatting with you, and look forward to the next one.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome.